Instead of spending money for food production, for education, for all the things that human beings need, healthcare, we spend it for weaponry. And that is, and I'm glad we started this discussion off by saying, what would you deal with if you were running for president? I think probably in my own mind, that's the most important issue.
That's Bernie Sanders in 1987, a former mayor, congressman, friend to punks everywhere.
It's an interesting hairdo.
And current U.S. Senator from Vermont. In 2020, he is running for president and saying the exact same things. But who is he? I'm comedian Mo Welch, and this is a story about a Democratic socialist who's a serious contender to become the President of the United States. Bernard Sanders was born in 1941 in Brooklyn, New York, to a lower middle-class Jewish family. They lived in a rent-controlled apartment in Flatbush. His father, Eli, immigrated from Poland, escaping prevalent anti-Semitism, but almost all of his family were murdered by Nazis in the Holocaust.
I learned a great deal about immigration as a child because my father came from Poland at the age of 17 without a nickel in his pocket.
In high school, Bernie ran for class president. No wonder the man had a heart attack. He's been running for office since the late 50s. While attending the University of Chicago, he organized a sit-in against segregation, protested police brutality, and the Vietnam War. Later, he attended the historic 1963 March on Washington, where Martin Luther King Jr. gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. During that same summer, Bernie was arrested for resisting arrest after he crossed a police line while protesting segregated schooling. He spent the night in jail and was fined $25. After college, Bernie moved to Vermont full-time in 1968, where he initially worked as a carpenter, only he wasn't that good. As one local put it, he was a carpenter. In the 70s, he ran for U.S. Senate and the Vermont governor's seat twice each under a third-party ticket. He lost. But he became the mayor of Burlington, Vermont in 1981, winning the race by just 10 votes. As an independent, he beat the two-party system and caught the nation's attention.
The leadership of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are tied to big money interests, and that neither of these parties will ever represent the people in this country who are demanding the real changes that have to take place.
He was re-elected mayor 3 times, serving 8 years. Although Bernie is a self-described socialist, his tenure as mayor was more pragmatic than you'd think. He worked with big business and compromised on things to get most of what he wanted accomplished, like revitalizing the waterfront. While mayor, he also hosted a public access show called Bernie Speaks with the Community. This show would end up serving as a record for his consistency. Take a look.
You're talking about this problem with the ozone layer that people see in the paper every day. When they're talking about climatic changes that are measurable within a few years' time, you're talking about wreaking havoc with the entire planet.
If we can't bring the entire world together, then the planet we're going to be leaving our kids and grandchildren will be increasingly unhealthy.
That crazy consistency, depending on how you look at it, is either very good or very bad. As mayor, Bernie championed what the UN recognized as an award-winning, sustainable, affordable housing program and was named one of America's top 20 mayors in 1987. In 1991, he won a U.S. House seat for the Green Mountain State. He was declared an honorary woman by Gloria Steinem.
That progressive movement, thanks to you and thanks to people like Bernie, has increased. There are subjects in the public opinion polls that weren't there at all 35 years ago.
And among other issues, Bernie voted against the Iraq War, which resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of human beings.
I have not heard any estimates of how many young American men and women might die in such a war, or how many tens of thousands of women and children in Iraq might also be killed. As a caring nation, we should do everything we can to prevent the horrible suffering that a war will cause.
But at other times, Bernie was further to the right on certain issues. Although he has never risen above the grade of a C- from the NRA, he did do some things in Congress that pleased them. He voted against the Brady Bill, a gun law making sure everyone who wanted to buy a handgun had to wait 5 days while law enforcement ran a background check. So that sucks.
Back in 1988, when I first ran for the United States Congress, way back then, I told the gun owners of the state of Vermont and I told the people of the state of Vermont, a state which has virtually no gun control, that I supported a ban on assault weapons.
He voted for Joe Biden's crime bill, which helped contribute to the rise in mass incarceration that disproportionately affected Black Americans. But his vote was more complicated than that. The bill included tons of provisions, like a ban on assault weapons and the Violence Against Women Act. Bernie knew there were bad aspects of the bill. He even spoke out against the mass incarceration provisions, but ultimately, he decided to vote for the controversial bill.
I have a number of serious problems with the crime bill, but one part of it that I vigorously support is the Violence Against Women Act. We urgently need the $1.8 billion in this bill to combat the epidemic of violence against women on the streets and in the homes of America.
In 2006, Bernie ran for Senate and won. He's chairman of the U.S. Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, where in 2014, along with John McCain, he passed a massive veterans bill to improve their health care. On December 10, 2010, Bernie took the floor of the Senate and went to bat against one of Obama's policies: the extension of some of Bush's tax breaks for the wealthiest Americans. Bernie's speech lasted 8.5 hours, or almost as long as The Irishman, and viewership crashed the Senate video server.
For those people who are earning $1 million a year or more, they on average, will be getting about $100,000 a year tax break.
Critics of Bernie's time in the Senate claim he didn't get much accomplished. In fact, he has, to date, sponsored over 200 bills while serving in the Senate. However, only 3 of those bills were enacted. And then Bernie decided to run for president in 2016. The primary was initially a tight race. Hillary narrowly beat Bernie in the Iowa caucuses, but Hillary gained steam. Then, the night before the California primary, the Associated Press released an article that read, "Hillary Clinton has commitments from the number of delegates needed to become the Democratic Party's presumptive nominee for president." Clinton had about 4 million more primary and caucus votes than Sanders, giving her a clear lead going into the Democratic National Convention. 2 weeks before the convention, Bernie dropped out of the race and endorsed Hillary. And just days prior to the convention, hacked emails were released by WikiLeaks showing several members of the Democratic National Committee staff were pulling for Hillary and were annoyed by Sanders. Critics of Bernie, like Hillary, claimed he waited too long to drop out and endorse her.
Bernie could have endorsed you quicker.
He could have. He hurt me. There's no doubt about it. He hurt me.
Bernie went on to hold 39 rallies in 13 states for Hillary. He also held 17 events in 11 states in the last week of the election in support of her, many in front of his supporters who booed the decision. In 2017, Bernie was back in the Senate, where he introduced Medicare for All.
I wrote the damn bill.
Bernie argues that every other major industrialized nation on Earth made healthcare a right, and he believes the U.S. should too. His Medicare for All proposes to replace existing insurance plans with a comprehensive government-run plan that covers more benefits. Critics argue, simply, that it's too costly. An estimate says Sanders' Medicare for All would cost roughly $34 trillion over a decade. According to ABC News, new research, which analyzed nearly 24 national and state-level single-payer healthcare proposals made over the last 30 years, suggests that single-payer plans are projected to save the country money over time. Opponents point out that the plan would raise taxes for most Americans. However, Bernie believes Americans would come out ahead on his system because they wouldn't be paying high-price premiums anymore.
Are people going to pay more in taxes? Yes. But at the end of the day, the overwhelming majority of people are going to end up paying less for health care because they're not paying premiums, co-payments, and deductibles.
Bernie decided to run for president again in 2020, with Medicare for All as his centerpiece. While Bernie was on the rise, he was suddenly slowed down by a heart attack. It scared many who looked at a candidate in their late 70s hoping to oust one of the most firebrand Home Alone 2 cameo stars of all time for the presidency. But just 2 weeks later, he was back on the debate stage, pushing the field further to the left. Bernie has shifted the national conversation. As the 2020 race heats up, his platform has taken center stage, subsidizing college, single-payer healthcare, a $15 minimum wage, and a federal jobs program, just to name a few. Politics keep changing, but Bernie stays the same. Sure, he's looked 70 since he was 25, but his views have been consistent just as long. It's pretty crazy, but there is one thing he's looking to change, at least since 2016.
We are going to win this election because we are going to put together the strongest grassroots coalition in the history of our country.